pretty crazy how quickly it all happened. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the story from now.
There was some contest in a magazine and we were like, we're teenagers, let's do this. So like we made a song and then ended up meeting with this A&R rep at the Peabody Hotel in Orlando. And then they signed us.
It was exactly that. It sounds like kind of an unbelievable story. I mean, the odds of something like that happening were very, very slim. I think we just didn't realize that at the time.
Get ready for the Rising Girl group.
They're beautiful, they're talented, and they're here. Give it up for
PYT. I'm Lydia. I'm Lauren. What's up, I'm Tracy. I'm Ashley.
Don't forget those names.
PYT.
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 PYT. PYT.
Can y'all give me a little harmony? Give me a little. A little acapella. Can I get a little acapella?
Yeah.
We had all been friends. I'm sure you know that part of the story. And Tracy and I had grown up together. We were close friends from the age of like 5 years old, performing together. And I think if my memory serves me correct, I have this image of us sitting at her family's kind of like buffet dining table and eating probably some kid cereal. And we literally just did see this blurb that was a songwriting contest, record original song for a chance to get a recording contract with Warner Brother Music. And kids are fearless. We were like, oh yeah, no problem. We could do that. We didn't understand, statistically the odds were very, very much stacked against us. And we had, of course, known Ashley and Lauren. Some thought went into, because we had a lot of really, really talented friends, but some thought went into who we thought would be the best people to work with, a good balance of, vocal ranges and styles and even personality styles. And I think it was like the perfect fit, the four of us together to collaborate. So we recorded a little demo, we submitted it, and I'm not sure how it happened, but that demo was actually passed on to Epic Records.
That just sounds like such a teenage dream. You're with your friends, you see like become a pop star in a magazine, and then you guys actually did it. Like that is so many kids' fantasy, at the slumber party with your girlfriends, singing into the toothbrush, pretending you're a girl group. And you guys actually made that come true, which I think is a big part of why so many people, around your age were such huge PYT fans, because you guys were living our dream and showing us that you could do it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember, playing out as a kid and being like, dreaming of all of that. And then it did just kind of like happen probably too soon. But it was really fun and crazy. It was crazy, not normal.
Yeah, and we definitely felt and were very much just normal kids at the time. It's kind of an unbelievable story. I mean, the odds of something like that happening were very, very slim. I think we just didn't realize that at the time.
Ashley Niven, Lydia Bell, Tracy Williams, and Lauren Mayu make up the pop group PYT.
If they look like pros, there's good reason for that. For the past year, PYT has been on a mission to prove themselves.
We definitely didn't understand the magnitude of what a recording contract even was, I think. Yeah.
Or that 25 years later, a random guy in LA would be calling you to ask about it,
Right. Or that, even when a recording contract, I think as kids, I don't think we, you know, maybe we would have felt more pressure if it was, and then in a month you're going to be on a national tour with Britney Spears, you know, that it would have resonated a little bit more. But at the time, that whole audition with the A&R, I feel like it felt like low pressure for us.
Which I think is something you can only feel, that like unchecked confidence of a 13-year-old. You were probably 13 around the time you were signed?
Tracy and I were actually still 12. I signed a recording contract in 1998. I was a 12-year-old child for sure. Yeah.
I mean, from inception of like first finding the magazine article to getting signed, I think was like less than 2 weeks. I mean, it was crazy. We had like recorded the demo, submitted the demo, the A&Rs flew in to Orlando to come and meet us and literally signed us the next day. Within less than a month, we were recording in TransCon and then on tour with Britney. So it was like a whirlwind. It really just happened so quickly.
Can you say anything about maybe for a few days? I know this was only 2 weeks, but the group was originally named Glory. Is that true?
It never like really like stuck completely. Like it wasn't like, oh, this is 100% the name. It was kind of just like being tossed around as an idea. But yes, it's so crazy that you even mentioned that right now. That's like an in the cuts knowledge situation. I even actually forgot about that.
To be honest, it was so long ago, and that was probably our name for what, 4 days to a week maybe. So I don't even know where that came from. I think it was just a name that we came up with when we, you know, made our little demo tape. And it was when we met with David and we were offered the contract. I think he proposed PYT immediately. And I think it was inspired by us singing some Jackson 5 songs. I think that was the connection.
So when we had submitted the demo that we did, like of singing and vocally or whatever, we did a photo shoot. Basically, the woman who ran the children's group that we were in, we shot like in her backyard and did like a whole photo shoot together. And that was where the name Glory originally came from. That was kind of like her brainchild. But when we ended up signing with Epic,
Epic wanted to sign a girl band named PYT. Like they wanted a band named PYT before they even met us.
Wow.
So that's just kind of how those guys work, you know?
I mean, like I said, it was such a short period of time that to me, it doesn't even feel like that was our name because it never got promoted. It like, you know, it lasted such a short period of time.
Then what can you say? There's a lot of discrepancy in the early press regarding what PYT really stands for. I've seen you guys say, you know, it's a reference to Michael Jackson, and then it's also Prove Yourself True. So what does it mean to you? At least.
I mean, to me, it was like the Michael Jackson song. And it did start out like that. And I want to say that at first they were cool with it and they allowed it. And then I think there were some issues with using the name like legally. And so they were kind of scrambling to find some kind of explanation for it. But really, it was just Pretty Young Thing.
The truth, finally, 25 years later.
And at the time, it really did stand for Pretty Young Things. They had the rights from Michael Jackson or whatever to be able to do it since we were signed to the same label. It wasn't until later that they decided to kind of like try to give it a different meaning, or which I don't understand the point of that. Like, because it seemed like we were already known as PYT, Pretty Young Things, for so long. So I'm not sure if like something legally came up later on that I just wasn't privy to as a kid, or that, you know, behind the scenes with Epic that became an issue. But my God, that ongoing saga of like, you know, how, you know, our name kept changing, which I feel like is so funny because we used to record all the time at TransCon with LFO, and we used to have jokes all the time where we'd make up different acronyms for what our names stood for, you know, like, so they'd call us, I don't know, they'd call us like Pick Your Toenails or Practice Your Tap Dancing, or they would just make up silly stuff and we would do the same thing like back to them. It just became a weird thing. Like, you know, even we didn't really know what our name was anymore. We're like, I don't even know. Like, what?
PYT stands for Prove Yourself True.
How did you come up with the name PYT?
We got it from an old Michael Jackson song, Pretty Young Things.
Right.
And what does PYT stand for?
Prove yourself true. Big Jackson 5 fans.
There you go. Very good to know.
I don't know why they ever really did that. Maybe they decided that we needed a differentiation from the Michael Jackson song, but I mean, that was the original impetus of the naming. So I don't know. I prefer to just think of it as that.
I know like maybe In Vogue, TLC, some of those other girl groups were sort of a springboard for what the label wanted you to be. And I was listening to Michael Jackson's PYT the other day, and he, you know, in the chorus, he's like TLC. And I'm like, maybe he's just listing girl group names in this song. Like, what's
That
what's
is
the next
so
one gonna
funny.
be?
Well, he says right after that, Tender Love and Care. So I don't know if that's what TLC actually stands for. Do you know?
I think it's like the girls' nicknames, like
Oh,
T-Bone,
okay.
Left
Oh,
Eye, and
T-Boz.
Chili.
Okay, that makes so much sense. Okay. PYT used to be like just a word that you would say like for like a, you know, hot girl, you know, for like a, you know, literally a pretty young thing. I think TLC was just also like, you know, he was saying Tender Love and Care, but to your point, maybe he was, you know, like reminiscing these things before they even happened, not knowing it. So who knows?
There's actually a really sweet quote from one of your early press releases. Before you can convince others that you are capable of accomplishing your goals and realizing your dreams, you have to totally believe in yourself and in those taking the journey with you. If you do that, you will ultimately prove yourself true.
Did I
Which,
say that?
I don't know if you said it. That kind of sounds like,
I think
label.
Lydia might have said that.
Okay, wow. Like, why do I have chills reading that? It's so deep for some
That's too
13-year-olds.
mindful for a normal, your average 13, 14-year-old. But Lydia would have said something like that.
I'm not sure why we weren't a little more like transparent with choice at the time, because it was confusing. There were a lot of things I think that were confusing to fans when we did a little bit of a pivot. And that was one of them.
Ashley mentioned that one of the songs you recorded for your first demo was a song called Got It Going On.
Mm-hmm.
That was originally recorded by a girl group that Willa Ford was in.
So before I was in PYT, Willa, myself, Mandy Moore, and this girl named Talia were in a girl group together called Eye Candy.
Wow.
And this
I'm
is,
shook.
there are photos of this and there are recordings of this. Those girls were like a good bit older than me. Like Mandy is probably like 5 or 6 years older. Same thing. Willa's like 6 or 7 years older. And then Talia was also. So I was like, me is like the baby. And then like they were all kind of, which is hysterical because you can definitely tell in like the photos, you're like, who's this tiny kid sister who's like in this band?
Eye Candy's a great girl group name. I'm glad PYT existed, but it would have been interesting to see what that was.
The world happens how it happens, and Eye Candy wasn't meant to be.
Certainly not. Certainly not. And you all went on to do different cool things. So
Yeah.
technically before PYT was formed, you guys also did a pilot called Divas.
Yes, and we were all in it. So that was obviously before the inception of the girl band, had nothing to do with the girl band. The same director of the children's group that we were in before had been working with some producers out in LA. And honestly, really what it was Glee or High School Musical, like before its time. Like she was definitely onto something. I just don't think the world was ready for it yet.
Well, the situation has gone too far. She's hanging out with a boy who drives a car. He's funny looking, that's plain to see. Why would she want him? She can have me.
Yeah, you really reminded me of that. That was so cute. That was a pilot that was kind of a creation of Cynthia Stevens, who was our director over at Entertainment Review. So that was one of her projects. That was a lot of fun. We were all in that. It's kind of a shame that that one didn't take off. It was a cute pilot.
Realized
Played
that
a
was
character named
pre-PYT.
Caroline from, I don't know, somewhere in the South. I loved horses.
They were like, her, she's gonna be the country girl.
Yep.
At that time, I feel like people either saw musicians as musicians or acting as acting. There's very few things that crossed over. The only sort of crossover there was like MTV, like music video television, where like you're showing music videos or you're doing live performances on TV, not really where you're having like a scripted television show that had a lot of music in it, So man, that would have been so cool. I would have loved to have done that. It's a shame that it didn't end up working out. But, I think it was because of that she met some of the executives from Sony that ended up getting introduced to us for us to get signed to Epic. Maybe it all, has a reason.
So I think it's like late 1998. You guys are 12 and 13 and you're signing
Mhm.
a major record deal with Epic Records. And then not long after that, you sign with Johnny Wright as your manager, who's, at the time he was like Britney and Sync, all these major
Yep.
artists. How much interaction did you actually have with Johnny if, he's managing all these other big artists?
So since his office was right across the street from where we recorded our album, actually not even across the street, they were like in the same like building units just across the street from each other. So it was like Johnny Wright's office, and then across the street was Transcontinental, where we recorded most of our album. So all the pop stars were in and out of there, whether they're going to see Johnny or going to record, or even there's a rehearsal space in the back. Like we got to see JoJo practice like before like that huge song came out. And I just remember being like, oh my God, this girl can sing. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, we did actually get to pop into Johnny's place quite often, and that was like kind of a cool part because he was such like I don't know what it was about that time where like managers were also kind of famous, but he was also kind of famous. Yeah, it was always just like a big show, and we did kind of get to see him a lot, and he'd come out to the tours because the big people we were opening for is who he was really there for. But just we were in his proximity a lot.
I mean, we would see him periodically here and there, like at bigger things, like when we did like the Nick Choice Awards or the Teen Choice Awards, or maybe at a music video shoot or something like that. But during our day-to-day, we had tour managers that like were with us morning, noon, and night for photo shoots, for any sort of performance, for radio shows, while we were recording at a studio. Like we always, it's so funny, like we were supervised at all times by adults. And it's funny, like I remember, I don't know, I think my mom told me at a later date that, like, some moms used to kind of question her, like, how could you let your daughter, go and do this and travel all over, and she's not having a childhood and whatever and all this other stuff and she's not supervised. And I'm just like, I was way more supervised than any other 12 or 13-year-old because we had two parents with us at all times. We had 1 to 2 tour managers. We had the bus driver. We had a teacher, our tutor, and then our like hair and makeup artist. So we were like around adults and we weren't allowed to do anything.
Our parents were pretty strict about making sure there were 2 parents on tour with us at all times. So we had 2 moms surrounding us, and I'm so glad that they did, just for safety purposes. Of course, at that age, it's just like, get the moms out of here. But now as an adult, I really, really appreciate that they made that call. And then also we were in school, so we had tutors that traveled with us. We had makeup artists that traveled with us. We had tour managers at all times. So
we were so PG. We weren't even PG-13. We were so PG. Our idea of having fun was like, when we'd stop at one of those, I don't know, you've been in Middle America, but the gas stations there are unreal. And you can go in there and get these crazy, like, not only would we load up on magazines and junk food and movies and whatever, but we'd get these giant coloring like things and we'd just sit there and color and gossip and do quizzes and like Cosmo Girl and like watch whatever movie we were watching. I mean, it was like this slumber party that never ended,
That's the image you guys portrayed, so I'm glad to see that this was real. Like,
we were such dorks. We didn't get into any trouble like that, like for real though, we didn't.
So in July 1999, you guys fly to LA to film Mandy Moore's Candy video. What memories do you have from that?
There was a pilot, oh my God, I don't even remember the name of it now, but it was like a hosted teen talk show. Think of like Access Hollywood or Extra, but with like 2 teenagers like hosting the show. And our musical guest, and this was before Mandy was signed to Epic Sony, was Mandy Moore. So that's how I initially met her. And then our moms are still to this day like best friends. But I used to spend the night at Mandy's house all the time. And that's how I invited her to be part of Eye Candy. And we had done some other things together. So I knew her before I did the Candy video.
Which is such a perfect Y2K music video with your infamous cameo as her besties in the lime green Beetle. Who could forget?
Come to me, this thing. Show me who you are, with the like Sony Psych CD player. That's what really tells me like what time it was. Like, oh my God, I had that thing and I thought it was the coolest ever. But filming that music video was so cool, like down to like the wardrobe and like all the sets that we went to in California. Like you see all those sets when you drive by like certain places, and it was just so cool. We weren't driving the Bug. It was like, because none of us were old enough to drive. So it was just getting like pulled, and there was like a camera, and it was just like, it was we were like 14. It was the coolest day ever. So fun.
It's actually really funny too, because, guys that I've dated who like didn't know, they're like, oh my gosh, like I totally watched this video and like crushed on and all this other stuff. It's like really weird for them to see something that they saw as a kid, not knowing that it's me, or seeing something that's PYT or a different show that I did, and then being like, oh my God, that's so weird.
And then not long after that, on July 7th, 1999, you guys joined the NSYNC tour, and that's technically one of your first PYT performances on this major tour. I'm just thinking, how insane is that your first performance as a unit, as a group, is on a tour with NSYNC, arguably the biggest band at the time?
Yeah, it was fast and it was pretty incredible. We had all grown up professionally performing, but it's very different when you are, I guess, a little bit more anonymous. You're on a stage, nobody really knows who you are. It's your job to kind of just portray another character. So it was very interesting to be performing and people know who we are and rooting for us. And yeah, with bands that, of course, at our age, we loved ourselves, and that was very, very exciting, that energy.
I tell you, those NSYNC shows, the NSYNC, the Britney Spears, Destiny's Child, those were crazy. Like, I had to like take myself out of it a little bit to even just like do it, because I was so scared and so nervous. It felt like so big.
Do you remember any interaction with NSYNC or Britney or any of the Destiny's Child girls? Like any advice?
I remember JC in line once told me that I should mix my penne and red sauce in, and then I got white sauce anyway.
You guys did like 32 dates with NSYNC. And then in August, you actually joined Britney's Baby One More Time tour. So in this one summer, you're on tour with NSYNC and Britney.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it wasn't long before that I had seen Britney. She opened for someone, maybe it was NSYNC, I don't know, in Tampa before she had her own tour. And I remember that was so trippy because like me seeing her and then her headlining and then me being part of her tour, it was like really just such like a whirlwind and such a crazy, trajectory that we were on. I feel like that's one of the things that now looking back, I realize as being the most unique because I feel like nothing happens that quickly like now anymore. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess you can have an overnight viral sensation or whatever, something like that. But I just feel like so much of the industry, there's ups and downs, whatever, but it's usually like more of like a steady trajectory. That was like such like a skyrocket sort of experience. Like looking back, I'm like, wow, so much happened so quickly.
It also shows the investment and the attention that the label was giving you at the time.
For sure. No, they definitely believed in us. Also, looking back, a lot of this is timing related. And just with anything, it's, when you're, when a feature film comes out or a single or an album comes out. And I feel like they did a lot of things, like, for example, paying a ton of money for us to be on tour. We didn't have a single. Like, I remember we had
Yeah.
started tour and there wasn't anything to sell. Like, so what are we even promoting?
You were touring nonstop for basically 2 years between
Yeah.
Destiny's Child, 98 Degrees, Britney, and Sync without anything to sell. And, there were like these little fun sampler cassettes that were handed out.
But they were just handed out for free. We weren't selling
Yeah.
anything. And it's not cheap, to put 4 girls plus 2 moms plus a tour manager plus a tutor plus a bus driver plus a hair and makeup artist up in hotels all over the country plus a tour bus plus, all the other things that we needed from our music and everything. I don't regret a single second of it. I feel so incredibly grateful for every single opportunity. I just, at the time, as being a kid, I was just there showing up and focusing, which, by the way, in a way, man, do I miss those days where I can just show up, do my creative thing, focus on nothing else, no business, no strategy or, editing or, making sure all these other things are done. It's just kind of done for you. Now I have to worry about all those things. So there's definitely a bliss that was surrounded in that in that general era. But yeah, I mean, it's a bummer because I think that hindsight is 2020 when you look back. So I mean, it could have ended up in many different ways. It ended up how it was supposed to. But yeah, I look back at some of those moments and I think like, man, sliding glass door opportunity where if these things had just been streamlined at the same time, how different it could have been.
And in some of the early press, like in the articles and even one of these PYT postcards that I have, it mentions a late 1999 release date for your album. So I imagine there were enough songs recorded to
We
have
did.
an album.
There
It's
was a
just-
lot that never came out that we actually performed, but never really made its way anywhere. And we used to like play games and stuff on stage sometimes with each other. We really got to a point where we were so in sync with each other that we just knew, we had done it so many times and rehearsed it so many times and whatever. Like everything was like, every harmony was like exactly where it needed to be. Like we really were super tight when it came to our live show. And I think that that was the one thing that they really did make sure first and foremost. I think that at the time, so many of the girl bands were gimmicky. Maybe one of them could sing or maybe a couple of them could dance, but our label really wanted to differentiate us and highlight the fact that, we all actually really could sing and we could all dance and that we were, really great together. And I think that that's what they really had us focus on was making sure that the dance moves were perfect, that the harmonies were perfect, that, we could just bust out an a cappella anywhere we went, and impress people and show people that we really were singers and musicians.
Well, we were impressed.
Perfect.
So in fall 1999, after spending your summer on tour with NSYNC and Britney, you guys go back to school. What was it like after spending your summer with the biggest stars in the country and then going back to school?
Honestly, horrible. 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 Like
You were
I'm not-
ready to just be doing it 24/7, or the actual school experience wasn't great because of, people knew what you were up to over the summer?
It was just isolating, because you're no longer, you're in your mind a kid, but you're not developed in the same way as regular kids. And so you're it's isolating and kids aren't nice. So yeah.
Like kids were crazy, man. Like in a way, I mean, everyone knew that we were doing it, right? We were very well known, like in our town, especially like Tampa wasn't nearly as big, then as it even is now, which it's still not like New York or LA by any means, but we were pretty well known here. And I don't know, I mean, kids, like on one hand, they thought it was cool, but on the other hand, because we missed so much school, I mean, like think about it, like, as a kid, if you even like got sick for like, a couple days and missed class, like you came back and you're like, oh, I missed all of this stuff and all of this, you don't have anything, idea of what's going on in the social sector and everything. I mean, imagine doing that for like a month at a time or being gone a full week and then coming back and then being gone another 2 weeks and then coming back. It was kind of like almost in a way being the new kid again and again and again. It was really hard. I felt like in some ways my school was really great and worked with me a lot academically, friendship wise. I think that's why I fostered a lot of friendships outside of my specific school because it was just a weird dynamic to like be involved and to have known these kids since I was like a tiny little baby toddler, but then also like not be there for the day to day. So it was like like I was accepted, but not, which honestly in a way is kind of harder. Like it wasn't like I was made fun of or anything necessarily, but it was kind of like, they'd be like, oh, like Lauren thinks she's too Hollywood to come to the party. And I'm like, Lauren didn't know about the party. I would have loved to have come. Nobody invited me. It was
Yeah.
kind of like that, where people would just assume I had something going on, so I wouldn't even get invited and I would feel left out a lot. But I made really amazing relationships, with people outside of school, with people in different states and things like that. And I think maybe even now to this day, I've always been the type of person that I have just looked for amazing people and have kind of cherry picked my favorite humans from across the globe and made my own little squad.
I think that the school part was maybe one of the more challenging things about the process. So, and I'm always trying to explain it to people. First, we're all pretty awkward at that age. We're very socially awkward between the ages of 12 and 15. I was certainly no exception to that. But on top of that, socially it was a little tricky because those are your very, very most formative years. And I think that for a lot of people, that's the age where you are coming into yourself. You're learning what your tastes are. You're developing a little more autonomy, style, surrounding yourself with people that align with your values. And you had said at the beginning of this interview that so much is manufactured. The one thing that wasn't was that we were really, really close friends and still are to this day. Like I said, I just had a long call with Ashley.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
So on August 31st, 1999, Something More Beautiful, the single, is released. I love this quote from Billboard. They described it as hooky as a hand-knit shawl, and immediate and inviting as much of what Top 40 is serving in plentitude these days.
Think about us all the time. I love you forever. If you were mine, oh, oh. I want something more. I want something more from you, boy. You want us to be friends. I'll be losing again. Don't you know what I want from you, baby? Something more beautiful.
I love that song. I think it's the most nostalgic for me. Not sure if you noticed that. Who's that? Nikki Webster. Is she
Yes.
Australian? She released that song as well. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but that was also adorable. I'm a fan of that song. I like it. It's very nostalgic.
And I just feel like that song is such a good encapsulation of that late 90s bubblegum pop, like percussive piano.
Yeah, definitely like bubblegum pop, right on the nose. Yeah.
Was there ever a plan for a music video for that song?
Not that I know of. No one ever mentioned it. I don't think so. It was so funny. I feel like it was a Swedish production duo that did that song and a few of the other ones at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And it was so funny working with them because I feel like the girls and I, we were used to tough love growing up when it came to being good and being prepared and, doing your parts right and all this other stuff from the children's group that we were in. And it was so funny because, he was kind of treating us very fragilely. He'd be like, okay, that was like beautiful, perfect, like so wonderful and great, but you're a little flat, and it was like, okay, you could just skip all the other stuff and just tell us that it sucked and we'll just do it again, so I just thought it was so funny, like, especially me having grown up in entertainment, I was kind of chuckling to myself and in my head being like, this is so funny. This man is so sincerely trying not to offend us or whatever. And we're so used to like, people being very tough with us that it was almost comical, I feel like, to us and the girls that he was like extra cautious about our feelings.
The resilience of a child star.
Exactly. I'm like, listen, you don't have to coddle me, sir.
No one feels more like an adult than like a 15-year-old,
Oh, you are so true. We got emancipated though at 12 and 13. That was like one of the first things that Epic did because they wanted to be able to slave labor us.
That is insane.
So legally I was an adult since I was 12 or 13. I forget how old I was exactly, but
Wow, that is
yeah.
an interesting business practice. But I mean,
Yes,
you
it
still had
is.
you still had your parents with you, so
Oh
yeah,
yeah. I mean, I think it's because sometimes it's weird hours and whatever. Like we definitely we got plenty of sleep. We were very much taken care of. We got fed, all the things. But when push came to shove and when it was crunch time, sometimes we'd be in the studio for like 8 hours at once or whatever, which is a lot for a 12-year-old, And then sometimes we'd have weird performance times and stuff like that where we'd have to be up late or up super early or all these other things. But I think that that's just one thing that you learn as a performer. It's, it's a lot of feast or famine. It's a lot of, it's all happened. Like when it rains, it pours sort of, situation. And so I think that you learn to take advantage of the opportunities that you have in that moment. And then when it's done, just go die in your bed.
Yeah, exactly. Just go sleep for the 2 days you have off or whatever. There's all these like early PYT songs that have this very distinct bubblegum feel, like Book of Dreams, DFW, Walk Before We Run. I know a lot of
Yeah.
those were done with the Wasabies.
I remember all those songs. Yeah. DFW, DFW with PYT.
And I know it was in your early set list. Y'all would perform that a lot. And like the last 30 seconds of that song, the tempo drops and it gets really slow. And it's just such a Backstreet moment. I'm
Oh,
imagining you
yes.
like, slow-mo.
Break it on down for me, girl.
So I think it's late 1999 or early 2000. The group Anthem, Chenoa and Chinette Higgins, they come to Orlando to help you guys work on the album and write some new songs.
Yep.
The hip hop sound of the group's first single, referencing Down With Me, comes
Mm-hmm.
courtesy of 24-year-old twin sisters Chinette and Chenoa Higgins. The
That's
twins,
crazy, by the way, that they're only 24 then, because to me, as a child, I thought they were full on adults. And now, like, 24 seems so young. That's nuts. I had no idea that they were only 24 when they did that. That is
yeah.
crazy. Okay, you just blew my mind. I thought they were for sure like in their late 30s.
They were 24.
What did you think they were at the
I
time?
thought they were just like grown women. That's so funny. They were so talented. They were Black women that they had try to come in and make us sound more Black, to be honest. When those ladies probably deserved a record label deal.
But you know, it's because like when you're 12, everyone's super old. You know, you're like, oh, they're so old, you know, but they were like
Totally.
pretty young, actually. That's crazy. Okay, sorry, continue.
I mean, that's actually how I felt about you girls, because we're essentially the same age. Looking
Yeah.
up to you when I'm 10 and you're 13, 14, and also
Yeah.
the styling on you guys really fooled
Oh,
me.
we look much older than what we were for sure.
Yeah. So it's that whole like superiority complex of the
Right.
age that is so different. The twins who make up the urban act Anthem hail from South Central Los Angeles and were hired by Epic last fall to write new urban tinged songs for PYT. During their 2-week visit with PYT near Orlando, they hit it off well with the girls and were struck by their strong friendship and loyalty. They heard a story about a girl who razzed some of the members about being in PYT, and the feeling was, just because we're in PYT doesn't mean you have to be mad at us, says Chinette. So we decided to do a song geared around the PYT name and with a message that we're strong as a unit. The result is PYT Down With Me. And then you say, the song is more like a what if thing, like how we would watch out for each other if someone ever came along to mess with what we have. I love
That
the
is
hypothetical.
such, by the way, a young Lauren thing to say, because I feel like growing up in entertainment and being like in front of a camera spotlight, like I was always, nowadays I feel like people, you know, especially with reality television or even honestly with social media, people really applaud people for either being extra, extra honest and gritty and like, you know, saying the hard things or whatever, going through that, or also on reality television, we're like talking shit about other people, whatever. And that is just everything I was taught not to do and not to be when I was a kid. So anytime that there would be any way that someone would, you know, make it seem like there was a conflict, I'd be like, oh no, it's not really, you know, like I that's just so funny that I was quoted saying that, because I look back at that time, I'm like, man, it's so interesting how like the industry has changed, because I've had like, you know, different people reach out to me about being in certain reality shows, and I feel like I'd be the worst reality show contestant, because I would just be like, you know what, I think that person was just having a bad day. They're great. I have like, here's some great things I have to say about that person. Like it would be such boring television.
You're
'Cause
too
I would
media
just
trained.
like, I would just smooth it over, you know?
Yeah.
That's so funny that that was my quote.
I bring that up because there is a very obvious shift between Something More Beautiful, your technical first single, and then what Epic was calling your debut single, PYT. I love the revisionist history. They were like, oh no, this is their first single, when actually like we already have
You're
had a
like,
single.
no, it wasn't. Like, you're not fooling us. We know.
Yeah, like I bought it, I was there. What can you say about the shift in sound from Something More Beautiful to this new version of the album? Did you like it? I love it. I loved it all, but anyway, go ahead.
I did love it because I loved like Christina Aguilera. You know, I think like Christina Aguilera had just come out at that time. TLC, Destiny's Child, obviously, 3LW, which they were developing us at the same time. Yeah, I mean, I love the sound. I think it was maybe like a little forced for us girls. So maybe it wasn't like, didn't translate as well as it could have, but I mean, I loved the songs at the time. I thought they were super fun.
I think that the shift, and Lauren has touched on this a little bit in interviews before, and I completely agree. I think the shift was an interesting business decision. One that, you know, our opinion at the time didn't really matter. We were minors, we were new to the industry. Again, we didn't really have any creative freedom at all. So nothing was quite up for a vote. It was Sony making sure that they met their bottom line, and every decision they made was just, are we going to net more than we are spending? I think that Sony at the time was seeing, you have to keep in mind, we were also on tour with Destiny's Child. I think they saw Destiny's Child, Beyonce as kind of the next wave in music. The Britney era was dying down a little bit. And I think they were just kind of trying to get ahead of that sound. And I just think that the timing was confusing for fans. It's almost like we wound up with two different groups of fans. We had one fan base that had seen us on tour. They'd heard us singing certain songs. They were given, you know, snippet tapes of those songs. They learned them. And then all of a sudden, there's this new music on the radio that sounds completely different. And we had fans that their first experience of us was the radio songs, but they didn't necessarily even know who we are. They didn't have like that image of us. They hadn't seen us perform. And so I think it was very confusing for us to get our name out at that point. You know, it was almost like it was two completely different bands.
You know, it's so interesting. Actually, now that you mention this, I've never really thought about it before, but I think now I look at music as such like an expression of what moves me or what I really love. It wasn't until shortly after PYT that I got really into songwriting, and I started writing songs for TV and feature films and national commercials and all that stuff. So prior to that, it was almost like an acting role to me, where like it didn't actually faze me that the style changed because I was playing a part. Kind of. Because to me, I wasn't writing this music. It's not like the first vibe moved me more than the second sound. I don't think truly either one of them was really me or who. I mean, like now I'm a dance electronic music artist. So now like we know the type of music now that like, you know, really moves me. I also really love like funk and soul and disco and stuff. And none of that was in PYT at all, you know? So I think at the time I love to sing, I love to dance, I love music in general. And I think I looked at it as like, oh, this is the persona that I'm gonna like slip into. So I think almost like a, you know, playing a character or playing a role, like, okay, this is the vibe now. This is like who I am. And it really did start to permeate like my actual, because it was almost like a character that I never stopped playing. Kind of like if somebody was like a series regular on a TV show that went on for like, you know, 15 seasons or something like that. Because a lot of like the style, both like vocally and then also like my dance style and then also what I wore, like everything kind of started to meld towards that, which is really interesting. Maybe it also is because it was such like formative years for me that like that rubbed off on me or whatever. But that's interesting because I never really thought about that actually. But now looking back, I feel like that's kind of how I looked at it until I started writing music of my own.
Knowing your musical theater background and your history being an actor, that totally makes sense that, you know, you were sort of, you know, playing the role of Lauren in PYT this week.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, we did. You know, I do remember seeing some people like Christina Aguilera and stuff who like, you know, she came out as one thing and then the vibe changed substantially. And I think I also recognized that we needed to start somewhere and we needed to create a following and a fan base. And then, you know, once you create that, you have a lot more flexibility to then take those fans with you on a journey as you grow, as you mature, as you know, age out of maybe a certain sound and into a new sound or whatever, and are able to kind of do that. So I think from an early age, I also understood that. And I understood that like this style or this vibe may not be forever, but this is what it is now. And I love what I do. You know, like I mean, no more exciting place for me than when I was on stage and performing. I loved every second of it. You know, in terms of the stage presence, that really was authentic. Like that wasn't like anyone really taught us what we should or should not be on stage. Like we did feel powerful, like being up there, you know? It's like we had done the work, done the time, knew our dance moves, knew our vocals, all the other stuff, and we felt powerful, like together as a unit up there performing. We felt good about it. We were excited to, you know, we felt like the show that we had to provide for everyone was good. So I think that was really within us. I don't think that was something that anyone, you know, forced us to be. They had kind of mapped out an idea of what they wanted us to be and wanted to kind of see that to fruition. But on the day to day, I mean, you know, we had say in certain stuff, and I definitely would speak up. I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying I always won the argument, but you know, I would voice it.
I'm curious if you guys received any sort of media training, like where you sat down and like, this is who you can say is your idol. Like, Ashley, you have to say Barbara Streisand. And luckily for you, that was true. But like, are these things filtered through a label lens?
Like to the point where I didn't even want to speak. So yeah.
And what does media training look like? Are you like in a classroom? Like
You're
what
in
is
like a big boardroom at, Sony Music, and someone's telling you how to answer a question. And
well,
so, I mean, I just got to the point where I was just like, I don't want to say anything because I was just so young and shy. And, I was like, okay, well, I'll just sing. I don't want to talk at all.
just listen to my
So,
records.
I mean, at that point, I had probably been in the media and done a lot more interviews than the other girls. So I was a little bit more used to it, but the other girls were good at talking about stuff too. They did have people come give us kind of like talking points and stuff like that and helping us to be able to just open up and articulate and all those sorts of things. But I don't remember us ever really being told specifically, say this or don't say this or anything like that.
The industry at that time, there really was no autonomy. So, like we had stylists, so I didn't really develop a personal sense of style. We had media coaching. Even though most of the questions that we had been asked were pretty shallow, surface level things, taste in music, favorite food. Even some of that they reeled in a little bit. What we wore, even diet to some extent, right down to interview questions. A lot of that was sort of dictated to us at the time. So it was very challenging being that age and not quite having a sense of self. And at the same time, being in the public image, so people feel like they know me a little bit. And even that is a bit of a facade, right? So
Yeah.
I think socially it was really, really challenging for me at that age, outside of the group itself. And it took a
Right.
long time to kind of find my own voice. So I think that was probably the case for all of us to some extent. But I don't want to speak for anyone but myself. Just 12 to 15. I mean, it's so awkward and you're just figuring it out.
Probably the most awkward time in life. And
It is.
I'm
It is.
thinking back to myself at 12 to 15, I was so many different people in
Yeah.
those ages. Every week you can have a different personality. That's not really the case if you're in the public eye and you're in every month of Popstar magazine with a new
Yeah.
quote about your favorite pop boy or whatever.
It was interesting, I mean, even for years after, still kind of being associated with that image, that for me, I think in many ways, it just kind of felt like a job. I'd always been working. It felt like a job, but that was sort of wrapped into who I was for a long time. Now, it's been so long that it's not the case anymore. But in the immediate aftermath of that, yeah, it was kind of hard to separate myself from that image and that job.
On March 21st, 2000, Sweet Kisses is released as a radio single, which
I don't even remember that. In my knowledge, Sweet Kisses is like only on a soundtrack. I don't even remember that being released to radio.
yeah, no, it was. That just kind of goes to sort of show that I'm not necessarily scrambling, but like just maybe a lack of vision with this whole release and timeline and strategy. It's just a little confusing as a consumer and a fan.
You're telling me it's
Yeah.
confusing as an artist. I don't even remember that being, I don't even remember what you're telling me. Like, I'm like, really? Like if somebody
Yeah.
had asked me that, I'm believing you because, you've obviously done your research and know and have the CD right there. But if
Yeah.
somebody else were telling me that, I'd be like, oh no, that was never released as a single.
I ain't looking for no guy who thinks he's too cool. I don't want no one to play me for a fool. What I'm looking for, I found it so delicious. All I really need is sweet, sweet kisses.
Listen, now you're starting to hit the nail on the head of all the confusion that was happening, not only from the vibe and the genre, but then also on the release dates and then on the messaging saying this is the first single. No, this is the first single. No, I think that
Yeah.
a lot of people were confused.
Not long after that, in May 2000, you guys shoot the PYT Down With Me video back in
Mhm.
LA.
We had no idea what to expect. We showed up. We're like, we have dancers. We have an army of them. We're like, we're gonna fly. We're like, we were like, this is so cool. We had never even seen the sets.
Oh, they spent like $1 million on that video.
And it looks like $1 million.
It was crazy. That was so cool. It was at WB Studios. They built these crazy sets for us. They had all these incredible dancers. Like, I think one of my favorite parts, which is like super girly, but I just loved like going into the room where they picked out all the clothes for us, and you get to pick whatever you want. There's like all kinds of stuff. And that was probably the tip top of it, like doing the videos. So cool. So fun. They hoisted us up inside that basket thing. We're like spinning around in circles. It was crazy.
Lauren looks like she's flying at one point. I'm like, how
She
do they
was
even
really
do
good
this?
at it. Yeah. We were all like, whoa.
So yeah, you guys shot this huge, big budget. I read 500K video for Down With Me. The production value on the Down With Me video is so immense. And then all for that video to just not even really come out officially.
I know. It never really did. It played, like I said, like in Europe. I had a friend that was living over in London, and he said he would see it on MTV in London all the time. I think a lot of the world, especially at that time, was taking kind of like their nods of like what was cool from American pop culture, American music, American, you know. And so for us not to be on MTV in the States was definitely like a huge negative, I'd say, like in that sense, or missed opportunity, I guess is a better word.
And then the Down With Me single comes out August 29th, 2000. It's released as a CD single, but then was quickly recalled as the single, according to the producer, Andre Cully from The Mercenaries.
Once again, you know more than me. I don't even remember it being recalled.
Do you remember why it was recalled as a single? I know Same Old was the next one, but do you remember a reasoning for that?
It
Why
probably wasn't picking up at radio like they wanted it to, honestly. Like, it's probably just like that simple. But like that kind of stuff isn't something that we would ever, you know, they would change their minds a lot too about what they wanted. And there was a lot of like cooks in the kitchen. And so it was like someone wanted to go super hard one way and then super hard the other way. And then like they don't know how to just like, they just throw money at stuff. So it's like one mistake is like a big deal. You know, so I think just making the wrong choices, they made the wrong choices with songs and, you know, they didn't do well at radio.
I think it was a great music video. As you said, it was a pretty big budget. Ashley was amazing in it. In particular, got like a big standing ovation from everyone after. And I'm not sure really why Sony made the call. I think both songs were great. But yeah, again, it just kind of comes down to timing and budget. And I wish that we did have a little more say in how the money was spent and the timing, and it's just not how the industry worked back then, especially not if you're a minor.
I don't know, maybe they just decided like, okay, we got to get our stuff together and do this whole shebang at once, and maybe they just felt it was better to start with a new song. I honestly, I didn't even know they recalled it, so I don't know.
Who knows how things might have turned out if we had a little bit of a, you know, say in the business end of things.
Being a full-time kid, being a full-time student, and then also touring all over and having to record all these things, learn all these dance moves, whatever, I just didn't have the bandwidth to like really know a lot of times what was going on behind the scenes. I also, it's not like they wouldn't have told me had I asked, but it was also something that like, I feel like me growing up, I always had agents, managers, all these people doing these different individual tasks. So I saw that as like not my job, you know, like, oh, that's not something I have to worry about. I have to worry about knowing my songs. I have to worry about, you know, like being ready for this photo shoot. I have to worry about my biology test. You know, I have to worry about whatever these other things. As an adult, like I would want to know much more about what all that was going on. But we were just like, I don't think so young, you know, like for the majority of it. I mean, like by the end, we were only like 17. And even that is like, you know, super young. I mean, 12 is a child, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, so we just weren't involved in a lot of that. So a lot of those questions, I don't know.
Definitely an interesting time in the music industry. There was just so much money flying around, and then, you know, you don't even put out the video really. Like that's just insane to me.
Well, and then also it's like, how interesting can a 13-year-old be? You know, so when you have a bunch of adults trying to wrangle some teenagers to make them some money, you know, sometimes it doesn't work out because it's not authentic. You know, it could have been authentic, but that's not like, that would have taken longer. And it's not like that anymore because that doesn't really work because people want something that's super authentic now, you know, like Brat. Like, I know you love that, you know, like, you know, I love where pop music is going because nobody wants to see some overproduced thing anymore. They want to see the guts of somebody, you know.
Summer 2000 is big for you guys. You're on 3 soundtracks. You're on Center Stage, you're on Bring It On, and also Miss Congeniality, which are like huge blockbuster films, and they all feature PYT vocals. So what was it like being on such major soundtracks in the films?
Anywhere USA reminds me of a Backstreet Boys song.
Love Anywhere
Because
USA.
it's got all those like risers in it like that, you know.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh. To be a producer in 2001.
actually, in a lot of ways, I feel like those songs are actually more well known than even like Down With Me and Same Old and everything now, because especially it was so funny. It wasn't that long ago. It was maybe like 5 years ago or something like that, maybe a little longer. I went to one of my girlfriends, her younger sister was in this like dance recital thing or whatever that she was doing. And I went there and they used like 3 different PYT songs. They were all from Center Stage or like Bring It On or Miss Congeniality, because for the dance community, these soundtracks were like Bibles. Like they were massively, massively utilized as both like, dances for their concert recitals or just for tons of different, for competition, for all these different things. So I felt like it really kept the band alive, like in the sense of like of popularity, like way past the singles that we had released like prior to, because that spoke to a whole other generation that may not have known us as like the band when we were performing, but like knew us because they had watched those movies with their older siblings and then they were obsessed with it. And then they listened to the song.
I will say I love those movies. I love those movies today. Miss Congeniality, Bring It On, definitely cult classics. It's funny too, I have a student that I used to tutor and she was just obsessed with Miss Congeniality. And I remember being at her house and she'd have it on in the background all the time while she was working. And suddenly I like hear myself sing and I'm like, it's so interesting that she doesn't even realize that that's me, and this is just such a completely different time in my life and just very surreal.
I remember even going to college at UCLA, someone invited me to like come over to their dorm or whatever. They're like, oh yeah, come over and meet like my roommate and whatever. I'm like, okay. And I come over and we're dancing from Center Stage is playing. And I walk in and I thought they were making fun of me. And I walked in and I was like, that's not funny. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, my song. And they're like, what song? And I'm like, I realized, it took me a second to realize that they just loved this song. It had nothing to do with me. They didn't even know that it was me. They're like, we're obsessed with this. And then they just like freaked out. And I was like, what? Like, I thought like, I don't know. I was just like on a totally different planet because what are the odds? They asked me to come over and then they just start playing the song and they're like dancing to it and going. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Ha ha, it's funny, And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, and then when I told them, they were like,
It's the greatest time to set the floor on fire when you come alive. And we're dancing and it feels alright. I can't control my desire. And we're dancing and it feels alright.
and they lost their mind. But that also brings me back to how bad the publicity of Epic was. How do you have songs that are that wildly liked and that wildly popular by a fan base and they have no idea what the members look like, especially at a time where it wasn't like we were in some like pop rock band where like you don't know what the drummer looks like necessarily or whatever, or maybe you just know the lead singer, but we were in a pop girl band. Like that was kind of a big portion of like, the whole like, the dancing and the look and all that, it all kind of went together and blended together. So that was just another thing that was crazy to me, that even during the time when we were performing, people were resonating with the song, but we had so little out in terms of promotion, publicity, music videos, etc., that no one knew who we were unless we had just been on stage.
Yeah, I grew up in dance studios and I'm a dancer, and the Center Stage soundtrack is a classic.
So you totally get it. I mean, like people still love that, like from a dance community perspective, I feel like.
Absolutely. And you guys actually have 2 songs on the Center Stage soundtrack. It's A Girl Can Dream and We're Dancing.
I may never get to hold you sometime. I may never get to kiss you goodnight. I may never get to look deep in your eyes, or so it seems.
Because that's not even the song that most people know from Center Stage. It's really the And We're Dancing track that I feel like most people dance to,
Honestly, that's like one of the coolest parts. Even like now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm in there, It's very cool. I'm like grateful for those accomplishments for sure.
So then fast forward to January 28th, 2001, you ladies performed at the Super Bowl in Tampa. Do you know if that was televised?
I think it was in certain markets or for certain pre-games, like depending on like what network and stuff like that, like pieces of it were like shown. I think also maybe it was streamed or something, but it wasn't in like the official Super Bowl broadcast. The pre-game in general was not.
Well, I found photos from that performance and the styling is incredible. Very PYT, very early 2000s.
That's a pretty cool little claim to fame, performing at the Super Bowl. It was exciting. Definitely a lot of big acts there. And yeah, I mean, I think that was probably probably our final year as a group. So I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do that. That was pretty cool.
That was wild. I remember the studio in Tampa where we recorded at, and I wish I could remember the name. It was absolutely gorgeous. We recorded that song so that they would be able to approve it. And then, yeah, we just literally had this little stage in the middle of the huge football field. And I think Sting came out right after us with all the ships that they made for Come Sail Away. I was too young to even grasp what I was doing. I look back on it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, so crazy. But yeah, I mean, it was so fun.
Does it make performing now any easier just knowing you've already been in these stadiums and you've kind of been through the ringer already?
Oh yeah, even though like the meat of like growing I've done, you know, is probably been in the past like 10 years because I didn't sing for a while because I had like a little, you know, I just needed a break from it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of work to do when you're a performer. That definitely helped, but you know, I definitely still had like a long way to go. And I'm glad that I'm still doing it too.
Then in March 2001, you guys joined Destiny's Child Survivor Tour. Do you
Mhm.
have any memories with those ladies? Was there any interaction at all? I know it's
They
probably
actually were the ones that were probably like did more stuff with like the crew and with the other openers and all that stuff.
I will say notably at the start of Destiny's Child tour, Beyonce kind of pulled us into the room, said she wanted to formally meet us. I remember her saying that when she got started in the industry, she always wished that women who'd, you know, been there before would have taken her under their wing. That was the expression she used. And that she didn't have that. And she has always wanted to do that for other young women working in the industry and specifically requested that we pay that forward ourselves. So I thought that was really cool of her.
They would have like periodically just like a day where they'd maybe like rent out a roller skating rink or rent out a certain venue and it would be like free, like food, drinks, whatever, hanging out for all of the crew, all the openers, all of them or whatever. And so we got to interact with them a lot more than I'd say a lot of the ones that we actually saw the least were 98 Degrees for sure. They didn't really use the tour bus a lot. They would like fly in for a show and then maybe they'd be there one night or something and then they'd fly out and then they'd fly back, which was very different than a lot of the other bands that were just there with us like the full time, that they were kind of like focused on that. And maybe they would do other performances, but it was usually in the city that we were in, where I feel like 98 Degrees would like leave, go to a completely different state or to go to do something else and then come back. So we actually probably saw them the least and probably saw Destiny's Child the most.
I just remember Beyonce always just being like, hi girls, you know what I mean? It was just always like, oh, those little girls. And then I always just felt like a little girl. I was like, hi Beyonce. Just like Cowboy Carter.
what do we tell them, girls? Love.
Yeah.
I mean, that is so cool to say that you shared the stage. Well, it's cool that Beyonce can say that she toured with PYT,
That's
but it's
right.
also cool that you can say you performed with Beyonce.
Oh, it's very cool. It's very, very cool. They were all so gracious and so kind and everything. They were very, very nice to us.
It's rare that people can be an asshole and last that long in the industry. I mean, it happens,
That's
but
true.
I think you get further with being a kind person, which I can say the same for you.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Then on March 20th, 2001, Same Ol' is released again as your debut single, like the first official single from the album.
Yeah, we know there's been now Sweet Kisses, Something More Beautiful, and Down With Me.
So technically 4, but who's counting? Not
Yeah,
me.
who's
That's
counting
like
at this point?
such a fun video. It's giving like
Oh.
house party vibes. I think there's some cameos from B2K and Janae Aiko, who's now a big R&B star, which is like that typical early 2000s label cross-pollination of
Oh yeah.
we're gonna just promote you all together.
Uh-huh.
Same thing happened with Sarai, the rapper,
Yeah.
on your label. So do you have any fun memories from the Same Old video?
It was so crazy. Like we definitely had we were a lot more involved, both with like concept ideas and what was going on for the second video than we were for the first.
It is one of the things that we had a bit of artistic freedom on. I remember being handed resumes and photos of the sort of boyfriend characters that would wind up being cast and us hand selecting them. I think that one spoke a little to our experience. You know, you've got the texting scenes. I don't know if we're on like a BlackBerry or something like that. That one was a lot of fun to shoot.
I remember the most fun part of the second video is that we got to pick out like our boyfriends or whatever. And we were like, yes, because before a time, you know, where there's, you know, any sort of dating app like a Bumble or whatever, just to be a teenage girl and be able to just swipe and be like, next. No, oh, he's cute, was like crazy surreal, like a thing I would not forget because it was just so fun. I don't know, being able to pick like your hypothetical boyfriend and then he's just going to show up on set.
It was so cool. They rented a mansion in Beverly Hills, and just like the whole street was full of trucks for us and people and extras, and it was so fun. We got to like pick our boyfriends, and the boys were a little cocky too about us picking them. They were now in retrospect, so I'm gonna be like whoosh, whoosh. But yeah, we got to pick our boyfriends, and like we locked them in a closet. It was a really fun day, like so much fun. I wish I could just record songs and music videos. I do love performing live, but it's like so fun. It's so fun.
Absolutely. Your Hollywood moment.
Actually, I'm pretty sure one of the guys who plays one of your boyfriends is Justin Bobby from The Hills.
I actually ran into one of the guys, the one that I picked years later in LA. I don't know if it was at an audition or an event or whatever else, but I remember like him coming up to me and telling me and me being like,
also, there's this vinyl of Same Old Same Old as well, where you're giving your early 2000s PowerPoint. Reach the camera.
Yeah. By the way, that's hysterical because now I just had a flashback. I was shooting the first part of that ICU music video that I was just telling you about the other day, and I totally did this to camera once. And now, like with you saying that, I'm like, oh wow, I'm like pulling from my 13-year-old self.
We'll call it the Lauren. Everyone, hit the Lauren.
It did play a lot on like MTV London and in Europe and like different places, but it wasn't really gaining traction in the US because the song was hot and on the Billboard charts the year prior. So it was like really difficult to get the music video played in the United States. And like that is a serious misstep. Like, how do you spend $250,000 on a music video that's not going to get played in the States because the song was on the Billboard charts last year?
That's interesting. The timeline there is really, to what you're saying, just not very streamlined in the sense that I think the single came out in March and then you guys didn't film the video until like the summer. And at that point, things move so fast, especially in this time of like pop that's not disposable, but it's, just things move so quickly that you kind of miss the ship.
I think like by the time it came out, it was probably like towards the end of that year. I mean, a solid, if not a year, at least 6 months or so later. Like, that's just really difficult to have something, still be relevant at that time because it's hard to keep a song on the charts for that long. Even if you're on the charts for a couple months, 1 or 2 months, that's massive, So you have to be ready with all of those other things in line to be able to push them all at one time, basically,
As I've told you, I was spending way too much unsupervised time on the internet around these days. And one thing I remember about being a PYT fan back in the day was how strong and supportive the online community was for you guys. There were countless fan pages. You all were pretty communicative on your official message board. So what was it like interacting with fans that were also your peers? Having sort of like an online fandom, even before social media. Were you aware of it?
I got letters, but I really wasn't super active on the internet. I wasn't really allowed to use the internet or watch certain things on TV. So I didn't really connect on the internet as much as like the other girls did. Like I know Lauren was really good at it. Like every single letter that she got, I want to say like she wrote back to people. Like she was so good at it. I wasn't as good at that, but I always was like, it's just me. I'm like a weird kid. I'm shy. What?
Why are you guys obsessed with me?
I think I didn't get it. I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm just dorky,
Bringing that into the real world, when you would meet fans in real life, what was that like?
That was, it was just surreal. Like I always just kind of felt like, oh, they're just trying to be nice, but obviously very cool. I'm like, they couldn't possibly I don't know. I didn't see myself as like someone who should give someone an autograph at that point. So it was always like out of body experience, like, okay, whoa,
The PYT message board was poppin'. I found your old usernames. Yours was, do you remember this? I'm on cloud 9.
Yes.
This is how young and dumb we were. So we wanted to connect with fans. You know, everyone was telling us how important it was. We would sit down, we would get so much fan mail. We'd have to sign all of these cards. They'd sit us down. They'd be like, okay, girls, you have to sign a bunch of other stuff. We're sending it back to everyone, all this other stuff. So we're like, okay. But we wanted to be able to connect with them ourselves. With writing, we couldn't like write every fan an individual like letter back, right? So we would sign a postcard or whatever so that they'd have something individualized. That's really all we could do. What popped off at that time was AOL instant messaging. I don't know if you remember being like on AOL online all the time, writing with
Oh,
your
yeah.
friends, whatever. And as a kid, when we would be done with like our performance or whatever, if we were walking around and people saw us, whatever, we would just give out our screen name. And so I remember one time, like after being on tour for a couple months or whatever, I finally got back home because, you know, we didn't have laptops or anything. Like, you know, we just had like desktops at home. So I'd get home and I remember turning on my laptop and going on to AOL online, going to the instant messenger. And I got so many instant messages like at once that it like shut it down. Like it like literally like the whole computer just was like just died on me, you know, just like the whole program just shut down. We had to like reboot the whole thing. My parents were like, what keeps happening? It kept happening. So like they're like, stop giving away your screen name.
Incredible.
I think it was very touching. I think that it meant a lot to all four of us. We actually spent a lot of time on our tour buses trying to go through. I mean, mostly what we got was physical fan mail. Yeah, it was quite an outpouring.
And then the rest of the summer 2001, we are doing different radio shows. We're performing on the Mandy Moore Show on MTV, Bloomingdale's in New York, a radio show in Tucson, radio show in San Diego, Busch Gardens. You guys are just all over the country promoting. August 7th, 2001, we finally get the PYT album released with the celebratory PYT week in Tampa. Wish I could have been there.
I'm gonna be real honest with you, Chet. I don't remember PYT week. I remember
Maybe that was fake. Someone lied to me.
At some point, we got like a key to the city, and I think maybe that could have been part of it.
How did it feel to finally get your album out after, 2 years of recording, touring with literally everyone? What was it like to finally go in the store and see your face on an album?
And it was really cool. And that's like, when you went to the store to get a record too, because we don't really, kids don't really know what that's like anymore. I remember the first time I ever walked into a record store, I was like, I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to absorb. Let's go. You know what I mean? But like walking into a record store and not just it being there, but it being like on the little singles rack in the front. It was awesome, very cool.
Can we talk a little bit about your styling or fashion? Did you keep like a separate PYT section of your closet? And were you like using any of that stuff in your real life, like showing up to school, like dressed to the nines?
Yeah, I was definitely wearing all the clothes and yeah, definitely. Always the outfits, always with the outfits.
The 2000s was so interesting for style. I stand by a lot of it. I love the stuff that was a nod to the 70s. I stand by every pair of platform shoes I ever wore that everybody else hated. I'm gonna say my big regret with the styling was the bandanas. Like, can we talk about why were all the artists wearing those? I see photos of that and I just cringe so hard. I'm like, why were we all doing that? It looks absolutely ridiculous. But apart from the bandanas, it was fun.
And I'm glad you brought up bandanas because you actually sent this to me. But this is the PYT bandana.
We were so into bandanas, we were using it as merch.
Yeah, like
ridiculous.
I still got to find a way to style this into my...
Yeah, it's not going to hurt my feelings if you don't wear it.
What other friends did you make in the industry at that time? In your album thank yous, you shouted out Britney, LFO, NSYNC, Boys and Girls United, and C-Note. And then I've also seen you guys mention the groups like No Authority and Take 5 in other early interviews. And I know you recorded at TransCon, so I guess it's maybe just a Florida thing, or who else do you remember befriending at that time?
I just kind of remember hanging with Mandy Moore a little bit, but she was so mature and and I was more like a kid. We hung out with LFO a lot actually in the studio because we were recording at the same time. And I remember Rich, who's also gone now, being like, hey, listen to this silly song that I wrote. All the guys keep making fun of me. And he hit the little boombox with the track and it was like, New Kids on the Block, got a bunch of hits. Chinese food makes me sick. Like before they recorded it. So pretty cool.
They should have had Summer Girls featuring PYT. Come on.
We were so little. I remember them being like little girls.
Here's a quote from Lauren and Tracy. Lauren said, "And LFO, we love them. They're our favorite group. They call us their cousins." And then Tracy said, "LFO makes up names for what PYT stands for, like practice your tap dancing."
Yes! They did. Because we were supposed to come up with a name and we were like, I don't know. It's the worst letters ever to try to come up with something. Like, can I get a
Yeah.
vowel? Like
In October 2001, you guys had your final show as PYT with Mandy Moore at Tampa's Guavaween. At that point, did you know it was your final show? Like,
probably.
yeah,
Probably. I think we were all just sick of it, to be honest.
yeah,
You
it's a
know,
lot.
we all were just like ready to go back to school and like figure out who we were. And it had been like a drag out, whole thing.
Is there anything you can say about how it ended, how you left things, or did it just feel like that journey had come to an end?
That's another one that I think there's been always a lot of speculation on because, to my knowledge, Sony didn't have any sort of a press release or let anybody know their reasons for making that decision. Quite simply, Sony executives, their job is really bottom line. And so if it gets to a point where they believe they're going to be pouring more money into a project than they could possibly recoup, they're going to pull the plug. And so it really was a very simple business decision for them. And it's not one that we were really a part of in any way. That said, I think that by that point, I was really a little bit burnt out from the industry. And I think I wasn't the only one that felt that way. I loved performing. All of us, loved creating art, but I think the environment, especially in that era, was just really tough. And I think it was really tough for kids. I think that for me, I was excited to maybe experience school to the fullest because, yes, I experienced a little bit of school, but not much. And that's a hard thing for me to say out loud because there's so many kids at the time that would have traded school, traded anything to be in the position that I was. It's not that I wasn't grateful to do it, but I also wanted both experiences. So it's not that I asked to no longer do it, but there was a small part of me that felt a bit of relief in getting to just experience childhood while I still could. I say that and I just don't want it to come across as ungrateful for the experiences that we had. It was amazing. I'm glad that we had that for the years that we did, but it wasn't like a devastating blow when it ended either.
And then, like, not to be a total downer, but it does feel like a certain
I mean,
shift.
I was
Yeah.
being a little downer. It's okay.
Well, what I mean is obviously September 11th, 2001, it just feels
Oh.
like there's a certain shift in really in the culture. Just things shifted really like patriotic and a little more serious as well. And maybe there wasn't as much of a place for, a bubblegum teen pop situation. And I think that might be why I hold on to specifically the year 2001 so strongly, because it really does feel like, the end of that like childhood innocence.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and I'm like therapizing myself as I, do all
Yeah.
this. I'm like, oh, okay, well, shit, there we go.
That just got me a little bit. You totally, yeah.
Yeah, it just really feels like an end of a chapter in a way. So I'm sad that it was, the end for you guys, but obviously at that age, you're so many different people as a teenager. Every month you have a different hobby and a different friend group even. So if you guys are pigeonholed into this one PYT image, I can see how that might have been really stifling.
Yeah, and just confusing because like let's be real, when you're that age, you're not like, how can I be the best artist I can be? You're like, who am I?
Yeah. Certainly. So, what lessons from your time as a pop star in the pop industry do you take throughout your life today?
I tell you what, I will never take for granted having such a robust team around me. I feel like being an entertainer nowadays, for better and for worse, for better, you don't have to have necessarily a Sony behind you to be able to get notoriety or to be able to do what you love to do and make money from it, etc. You can self-release, you can become, famous on like YouTube and creating your own music and all these other things. And studios now are much more accessible and cheaper and easier to do and create and all this stuff. But man, I will say it was definitely nice having people doing all of these other things for you, where you can really focus on just the craft itself. I feel like nowadays being a successful entertainer means also being able to be a good business person, to be able to look over contracts, to be able to edit my certain like reels or certain things like that, or Final Cut Pro, to be able, I engineer my own vocals, I update my own website, and I know basic HTML encoding. I like know more, I so many things that I now know. I mean, I know I'm super tech savvy where I can set up and tear down all the different DJ equipment. I know Serato and Rekordbox. I know every single, the amount of knowledge that I have to be able to do the thing that I want to do is crazy sauce.
Yeah.
So there are all these other things. And like I said, in a way, it can make you feel powerful because knowledge is power. And if you know how to do these things, then you can use them to your advantage and be much more creative. Like, now when I have a vision on a music video or something else like that, I really can create that much more accurately to what I want rather than before. But I think I've always loved, and I think that's what I loved about acting too, a collaboration between, we're like, oh, this person does this thing amazing and this person does this thing amazing. And, when we come together, we create this awesome thing, like together that people love and that moves people or makes them feel something, which I think is so meaningful. I mean, I've learned that lesson. I mean, and trust me, there's like a million hard lessons along the way. I think I learned most of the other things that I take to heart now after the PYT days and after the pop girl band days. I think during that whole entire time period, like I was telling you, I was not only pretty sheltered, but everything just came so quickly and like so easily, which I feel like, now I have a lot more, not that I didn't appreciate it then, but I definitely, when I get big wins, because I have been in ups and downs in every, level in between, I really appreciate them now. Like, and I'm really like proud of like, not just the thing that I'm achieving, but also like maybe the dip before it and how I just didn't let that keep me down, but how I just kept going and got to this next thing because people forget about the dips. They don't even remember them. They don't even notice them. All they notice are the wins, but my God, are there some painful dips in between that I feel and still feel. I mean, I wish I could, I don't know. I've learned to compartmentalize it and I've learned to like let certain things go to a certain extent. I don't know. It's hard because when it's a craft like this, it is personal. It's not like, someone's job where they're selling, I don't know, something random that they didn't even make, selling like a medical device that they don't, that they just learned what it does. It's not like it's their brainchild and they did every single, aspect of it. It's like, it's hard because the music is me. Like I am writing it. I am finding like the stuff where I am creating the video. I am creating, helping to get it mixed and mastered. I am working with the other people. I'm seeing the vision from the beginning to the end. Same, with like a lot of the acting stuff and too. I mean, I guess that's a little different because there's a lot of people involved, but it definitely is personal. It's more personal. So it's like there will be certain memories, both good and bad from my past that will always stay with me. The good ones that like will keep me going and the bad ones that will still haunt me and still, I'll still have nightmares about them for sure. Actually, probably talking about it now, I'll probably have a nightmare about one tonight and be like, dang it.
Yeah, no, make sure you go on a good walk after this. Like maybe call your therapist. Just kidding.
Yeah, I feel like it's important to say sometimes the things that are harder to say are the not shiny, glamorous, beautiful things, because I feel for anyone who's out there trying to do anything well, it doesn't just have to be in entertainment. It could be, as, I don't know, starting their own company or whatever. It could, whatever. So many people, they only see the success. They don't see the day-to-day, like just hardships where like there's that certain email or that person that you've been waiting to hear from that you're just like, and you're like terrified to even open it. And you're like, oh God. I think it's important to say that. So just so that everyone knows, like we all go through it, like it happens to all of us. So it makes me feel like I'm less alone when I hear that from other artists that I admire and that I appreciate and that I feel like are killing it. So I try to let people know too that there's lots of other things you have to get through to get the good stuff.
Yes.
I think it was just a huge lesson in authenticity for me, like with relationships, with art endeavors. Yeah, just authenticity. Like just being yourself is so rewarding, and like if you can get people to like notice what you're doing when you're being yourself, like that is like what the roots of of it. Yeah, just being who you are and saying what you're actually thinking and not what you think people want you to be thinking.
Proving yourself true, perhaps. Sorry.
Prove yourself to me, boy.
I
I think
think
you're
you're
moving way too fast now.
Prove yourself